welcome to our session today about best of features of BW in SAP Datasphere. So my name is Klaus-Peter Sauer. I work on the product management side for SAP Datasphere, and together I'm joined today with my colleague
Dominik Kurz, and I'm also part of the product management and strategy team like KP and responsible for the regular BW stuff.
Okay, so let's have a look at the agenda, what we prepared for you today. So at the beginning, we will talk about BW modernization. So what could be potential way to go into a business data fabric direction. Then we will have a look at the best features which we already have in Datasphere, which you also know from your BW system. And at the end, we have a Q&A session. So already feel free to post your questions in the chat. There are a few colleagues there monitoring and moderating the questions already, but we also have some time at the end to answer your questions live directly here from the studio. So Dominik, let's have a start. Get into the first part here about BW modernization. So yeah, let's maybe step a little bit back and have a look at the market customer requirements, what we see talking to a lot of our BW customers. And a few topics we always hear and see is the architectures which get more and more complex over time. So usually in the cloud, everything apparently gets a little bit easier, but that's not really true for the data and analytics part, right? So because so many additional systems come into the picture today, and which all have different connectivity options, and so integrating all that data and handling the whole architecture landscape gets more and more complex. On the other side, we hear a lot about pressure on the IT departments to have a reduction in total cost of ownership and move away a little bit from the traditional on-prem or hosted environments into more open and public cloud solutions, right, where you at the end don't have to worry about the updates and all the administration or a lot of the administration stuff. There are other topics we hear specifically for customers who run their solutions for quite some time, sometimes decades even, right, that there's a need for more agility. And so don't wait, or business is no longer willing to wait for months or even years sometimes to have projects implemented. On the other hand, a lot of investment was already done in the existing solutions, right? So you don't want to start from scratch. You want to reuse a lot of the investments, specifically on our topic here, investments which were going into the BW systems over years, or sometimes also here even decades, right? To have a quick start in a new type of architecture. Then self-service, a hot topic in the analytics part for 10, almost 15 years even now, where we also started with Datasphere to offer more self-service capabilities also on the back-end side of things, right? Customers talking a lot about semantics, business semantics specifically, which ideally should be centralized. You don't want to apply it again and again manually, more or less. And last area here, of course, you want to invest into a scalable platform, don't want to be stuck at certain limits, right? And then, of course, on the modeling side, that should be simple to have this agile self-service mode at the end being implemented, right? And Dominik, why not have a look at what typical customers in their current situation, what kind of paths forward they can use, specifically with regards to a data fabric architecture, right? So we built the foundation there with Datasphere together, of course, with SAC SAP Analytics Cloud as our premium analytics tool, right? We have a lot of these topics addressed here, but let's have a look at the paths and the options.
Yeah, sounds good. So thanks for the great introduction, and maybe let's jump a bit on further and talk quickly about, let's say, explore SAP's target solution based on the regular SAP components. And today we thought maybe let's give you a short intro of, let's say, today's solution inside of the Business Warehouse context, and explaining also a little bit the target feature where, for example, some analytical or regular BW functionalities are going to move to, right? So especially, let's say, BW was in the past more or less, let's say, a whole platform, right? So it was not only a regular business warehouse solution. So also, for example, many add-ons were deployed based on a regular NetWeaver or business warehouse, like, for example, the VPC add-on or BCS for consolidation purposes. And I think what we clearly can say is that especially, for example, this left part, so the regular BW stack is really...
So the core data warehousing, right?
Exactly. So the complete modeling stack is completely being moved towards SAP Datasphere Core, right? Where you have all your modeling experience and stuff like that. And if we break it down, of course, one main component of BW was always this whole Business Explorer part, right? So having OLAP queries and stuff like that. And there, it's a bit a difference, right? So some parts of Business Explorer or the OLAP engine are completely being moved towards Datasphere. That's exactly what you see currently, for example, also in the analytic model, especially with calculated measures, calculated key figures, then of course having exception aggregation, so all those kind of topics. And if we're having a look onto the point below, so that means especially this planning part, there it's also a bit, let's say, different compared to the regular BW. So especially, for example, I think it's clear that the successor of BPC or BIP in the past is clearly SAC Planning. So the complete planning part is being moved towards Analytics Cloud. But what is quite interesting from my perspective is that now with our seamless planning approach, we also enable customers to store their planned data inside of Datasphere Core, right? And if we're looking more onto the right-hand side, I think it's clear that especially this, let's say, HANA part is completely being moved towards HANA Cloud, so which is also, let's say, the baseline of Datasphere Core. And more on the left-hand side, so the planning and consolidation is also an interesting piece, right? Because this is completely being moved out into S/4HANA group reporting, for example. But
the financial consolidation, yeah.
Exactly. But you can still use financial consolidation in the BW for HANA world, right? So there, for example, we also really offer a long-term support commitment, especially for the BCS add-on until 2040. And also the last point mentioned here is especially this ABAP part. So really a lot of customers have built really heavy ABAP applications based on Business Warehouse, right? And exactly this kind of, let's say, stuff is completely being moved to ABAP Cloud, so Steampunk. And I think let's go a little bit deeper into the use cases, right?
Sure.
And let's maybe explain you also a little bit what kind of modernization use cases for BW do we see as SAP. And I think, or everyone knows here in this session that we've clearly positioned Datasphere also as the successor of BW for HANA. But to be honest, we have many large customers based on BW, and really a lot of BW customers that really love BW and would like to stay on BW. And due to this reason, we have different kind of modernization use cases, right? And the first one, which is currently mentioned here, for example, on the left-hand side, is a complete renewal approach, right? So that means especially smaller or mid-sized companies are deciding really for this approach. So that's more or less really starting from the scratch and using accelerators such as data products, business content, semantic onboarding based on BW for HANA, S/4HANA, or also in future SAP HANA. We can maybe talk a bit about that also later on. So really getting away from this legacy deployment approach and move completely over towards Datasphere. And the other interesting piece here on the right-hand side is, or the other approach which is mentioned here, it is called data. So many customers are, to be honest, not able to reproduce or reload all the data, all the historical data from the source. And due to this reason, we said, hey, we need an easy option for customers to move exactly those kind of historical data towards Datasphere. And there our, let's say, future investments are coming Yeah, so that means we are really focusing on a tooling for BW where you really easily can then dump also BW data towards Datasphere core, and then starting in your own pace in the new modeling world in Datasphere. The next approach, more focused on semantic information and data itself. So really, as I've mentioned before, we really have a large BW installed base, and many customers would like to stay especially on BW 4HANA, which is also supported until 2040, of course. But really the good message is that BW4, for example, can be easily deployed in a hybrid approach together with Datasphere. Yeah. And then customers really can start, let's say, in their own pace on proven BW data and benefit, for example, on semantic onboarding options like we offer.
So you're reusing basically a lot of the investment which was there. And also, I think there's an option to have both in synchronization.
Right? Yeah, totally true. Also possible, for example, with BW Bridge. So that's more here on the right-hand side, right? So ABAP and cloud technology. So if really a customer would like to be completely getting rid of the installed base, completely getting away from legacy, and move over parts of their BW, they can move into BW Bridge. And there comes the synchronization option, especially for BW4 and BW Bridge. We have a synchronization option where you can then slowly move towards the public cloud approach.
Cool.
Right.
Okay, let's get to the second part of the presentation, what we talk about the best features which are already in Datasphere, which a lot of you guys might already know from BW. And the first topic here we brought is multi-language support. Sounds trivial or easy, but there are multiple facets to it. And the first topic here, language-dependent text, I think we have this for many years now in Datasphere. Already, it's basically the translation of your descriptions for texts or hierarchy texts, etc. So depending on the login language, you get it displayed in German, English, French, whatever kind of language you're using, and whatever kind of texts are, of course, language-dependent, maintained in the system. Second one, the translation dashboard, that is more facing the metadata itself, so your column names, the business names of your objects, etc., hierarchy labels, etc. That's what we brought in the first half of this year into the system, and both can be leveraged together with SAP Analytics Cloud, so that you have a seamless transition here between the tooling, and it's automatically detected if you have maintained it, of course.
Exactly. And I think we also reach feature parity with BW, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's have a look at the second one, currency conversion. Also a famous one in the SAP world, right? A lot of our customers have multinational business, right? So not just euros or dollars, it's transactional data there in multiple currencies. And of course, most of you guys know the construct with the currency tables, the T-core tables here in the source system in the ABAP stack, right? We can synchronize that and reuse exactly that same mechanisms which are there, which you know from BW, which you might know from the S4 ERP ECC world, right? It's exactly the same thing which we can leverage also natively in Datasphere, right? Very cool thing. Dominic, let's look at others.
Exactly. So what else do we have? So especially another feature that is also called Best of BW for Datasphere, right, is more or less this whole discussion around time dependency, which is established, I think, since a long time now in Datasphere. But especially in this case, of course, we should quickly highlight that we have introduced there a new, let's say, semantic type, so-called business date from and business date to, which is more or less, let's say, the starting and the end date. And of course, also, for example, optionally, so especially for this time dependency, you can also create on top of that time dependency some reference dates, which you can then use as variable input for your analytics cloud, right? Okay. So what else do we have? Hierarchies. I think hierarchies was really one of the highest anticipated features, right? And
specifically the more complex BW hierarchies, right? Because the other ones like parent-child level-based, we had this more or less from the beginning. Yeah.
But then I think, when did we introduce external hierarchies?
I think a year ago, and hierarchies with directories, so that complex construct many of you know from BW, that was last year, right? End of last year?
Last year in November. And the great message behind it is really that, especially in this hierarchy part, you can easily use your well-established BW hierarchy, move it over, for example, towards BW Bridge, and run it as an import towards Datasphere. And during this semantical onboarding, we are automatically create your new Datasphere hierarchy on a BW hierarchy. What else do we have, KP?
Yeah, trivial one, navigation and transitive attributes. But honestly, we waited on the BW world for a long time for the transitive attributes until they arrived. A few years ago, only in BW itself, we had it and still have it from day one with Datasphere, more or less, that you can really go down, have these nested dimensions and have the drill down path throughout the different dimensions there. So that's natively built in from day one. Another interesting one with also a lot of BW heritage, more or less, is the non-cumulative measures, right? So the measures where you don't simply just add stuff up. It's like stock items or bank balances, or in HR, you also use it where you have a reference point and then you have inflows, outflows of your warehouse, for example, right? So we built that in, when was it? Earlier this year, I believe.
In March, yeah.
Exactly. That's also natively there, which you can reuse. Sticking with measures, there's a lot of stuff we've built in over time, of course. Calculated measures, measures which you can restrict on certain dimensions or dimension values. A nice piece many of you know from BACS is constant selection, that you keep one value constant in comparison to others. Count distinct measures, currency conversion we talked about, non-cumulative we talked about. So the whole variety, more or less, is already there. Aggregations, also related to measures, right? So standard aggregations are there. Exception aggregation, I think that came in last year also,
Yeah.
I believe, right? So also a famous one. And what else? Variables. Dominic.
Yeah. So variables, really, I think we've also reached really a good state there in Datasphere, right? So you can easily use, for example, variables to your, or which fits to your analytic model in Datasphere. And we have a wide variety there, right? So having really a standard variable, which is used in a fact source to map it to input parameters, for example. We also have, for example, restricted measures available, or restricted measure variables. And of course, we're also offering filter variables. For example, we have reference date variables. And I think we can really compare it now from a, let's say, regular modeling world with BW Core, right? And maybe quickly, the last feature, which is also more or less the best of BW feature, is this whole discussion around business content, right? So we've built really a lot business content, especially for Datasphere. And we also reached really a good state, which is everything based on CDS. So there is also a nice overview available where you can easily compare, for example, what kind of BI content was there in the BW world, what is there now in Datasphere. And also many partners have built community content.
I think one big difference is also it's not stovepipe content, it's also foundational pieces. So if you have the finance foundation there, you can easily build stuff on top of it. Yeah, so let's have a look forward, right? So what you see on the left-hand side, that's what we just talked about the last few minutes. What we plan is also for the next years, additional functionalities like multi-structure queries, like unit conversions, alpha conversions, language selection during import, and of course supporting more data centers like always. And some pieces will not be moved over. You see it on the screen here, temporal hierarchy joins and stuff like that. Will not make it, but let's, before we go to Q&A, briefly have a look. We have different sessions around Datasphere. Have a look at, most of them ran already. The data product session comes tonight. And also there's some learning content available on the Learning Hub. And then I would say let's use the last few minutes on the Q&A part, right? Yeah, Dominic, let's have a look here at the questions. Is there any roadmap to consume Datasphere objects like tables into BW Bridge to enable file-based data sources consumed by BW?
Yeah, that's quite a good question. And I think as a short fun fact, we also had the same question a few seconds before, right?
Yeah.
So here in Heidelberg, and the good message is, so this feature is already being delivered, so you can still see it, for example, on the Roadmap Explorer, that you can use Datasphere as a source now for BW Bridge. Mm-hmm. So you can really write your CSV data, for example, that is inside of Datasphere back towards BW Bridge, and this is already being delivered since, I think, 2 or 3 weeks now, right?
Cool. Perfect segue. So let's have a look at the next one. What would you recommend to customers who are currently still running ECC, use the BW Bridge with content, or later move to Datasphere, or rebuild the business content on Datasphere directly? What would you say?
Yeah, also a good question. And to be honest, especially when a customer is still on the older ECC stack, it really makes sense to have BW Bridge in mind, right? So there you really have all, let's say, the content options and also this whole BW capabilities inside of the modern public cloud stack. And also, of course, you can start then building your propagation inbound layer, especially for ECC inside of BW Bridge, and then moving gradually over towards Datasphere Core.
Cool. Another interesting one here, how could the concepts of DTO, so data tiering optimization, be handled in Datasphere? Right? And I think we have that also with the BW Bridge already delivered, right?
Yeah, exactly. So with BW Bridge, we've already been delivered that, but the good message, I think, was also inside of inside of Muhammad's keynote, right? Where we have introduced a large system option. So the object store option for Datasphere Core, and there, of course, you have the option then completely to rethink your whole, let's say, data structure, what is your data strategy, and really, having also a scalable platform below where you can easily and also cheaper store data, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's have a look at further ones. Is there a best practice guide to model analytic models that are replacing the BEX queries for hierarchy and dynamic filters, and how do we manage structures? I think structure, interesting one, because that's what we're working on currently, right?
Exactly. So structures were also being listed in this roadmap slide before, right? So we are currently working on stacking support for the analytic model, and stacking support is then more or less the baseline for having multi-structures or 2 structures available inside of Datasphere Core. So this is in progress, and I think that we will deliver this under restriction in Q2. So hopefully in Q2, this is currently the plan, right? Okay. But especially also maybe this best practice is a good question. And we've introduced a blog series, so especially on this analytic model capabilities, so especially also on this best of BW features, so how to model, for example, time dependency, how to model a calculated measure. And also in future, of course, we will enhance this complete series. And I think the colleague published it 3 or 4 weeks before, right?
Right, so we're at the end of our session. Thanks for being with us. It was a pleasure. It was fun, Dominic, right?
Yeah, a lot of fun.
So enjoy the rest of TechEd and see you soon.